Have you ever moved into a new place, like unlocked the door for the very first time, and just immediately felt this heaviness in your chest?
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
Right. I mean, the boxes aren't even unpacked. The walls are completely bare. But the air itself feels dense, almost like particulate.
Yeah, it's like you can't point to a single physical flaw in the room, but your instincts are just screaming at you.
Exactly. Every instinct says something in this space is just fundamentally compromised.
Well, and it forces us to confront this really terrifying idea. I mean, we assume empty rooms are just neutral containers, right? Like there's waiting for our lives to fill them.
But they're not.
No, architecture absorbs. Spaces retain the effective residue of what happened inside them long before we ever arrived.
Which makes that visceral sensation you just described the perfect entry point for our deep dive today. We are unpacking this incredibly unsettling, frankly brilliant set of notes and narrative excerpts for a project titled Apartment 11.
By the Australian writer Vic Lewis.
Right. Yes, exactly. And to sort of set the framework for what we're about to explore, Lewis uses this opening quote from a Sylvia Plath poem, Event. It paints this picture of two people in bed. The quote is, "The moonlight, that chalk cliff, in whose rift we lie back to back."
It's so striking. Notice the spatial geometry Plath is using there. A rift.
A chasm.
Yeah, a physical chasm between two bodies that are occupying the exact same intimate space. And Lewis is taking that concept of isolation within proximity and applying it to a literal living space.
Right, because over the course of these notes, Apartment 11 transforms.
Oh, entirely. It goes from a mere shelter into this terrifying nexus where biological infection, historical haunting, and psychological collapse all just sort of bleed into one another.
Okay, so let's unpack this inciting incident.
Right.
The thing that forces our protagonist into this specific apartment is, well, it's a crisis of necessity.
Yeah, they didn't really want to move.
No. They had spent 8 years putting down roots in this previous house. They had a backyard, a real anchor to the physical world, you know? But then this sudden dual crisis shatters all that stability.
Right, because the protagonist's mother becomes gravely ill.
Gravely ill, yeah. And simultaneously, they receive a notice of sale on their property, so they have to leave.
And forced displacement fundamentally alters how you interact with the new environment. I mean, when you choose a home, you project your aspirations onto it.
They're excited.
Exactly. But when you are forced into a space under the shadow of grief and financial pressure, your psychological defenses are already completely breached.
And the protagonist is constantly flying back and forth to Perth, right, to care for their dying mother, which leaves their partner mostly alone in this new, strange place.
Yeah, and before the dust has even settled on the move, Lewis drops this really startling fragmented image into the notes.
Oh, the psychic. This part is wild.
It is. The protagonist consults a psychic, and the psychic channels a message from the protagonist's now deceased mother, delivering a warning that completely bypasses the obvious.
Right. The psychic says, not the visible rooms, something underneath.
Yeah.
And then delivers the phrase that becomes the chilling thesis for this entire deep dive. The psychic says, be careful what you take in what settles.
Let's examine the mechanics of what settles, because Lewis introduces this concept of dark matter.
Like in space.
Yeah, in astrophysics, dark matter is invisible, yet it exerts this massive gravitational pull that shapes entire galaxies.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in the context of domestic architecture, Lewis uses it to describe an ambient, particulate dread. It's the invisible weight of the couple's rapidly deteriorating relationship just hanging in the air of the apartment.
I want to give you a different way to visualize this dark matter, actually. Think of a house as a giant lung.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. Right. It breathes in whatever the occupants exhale. If a couple is constantly projecting hostility and paranoia and unspoken resentment, the air pressure of the room literally changes.
It's palpable.
It's like that drop in barometric pressure right before a violent thunderstorm. You don't need to see the lightning to know the atmosphere has turned hostile.
And that atmospheric hostility begins to map itself onto the physical environment, starting with the apartment number itself, 11.
Just the number 11.
Just the number, yeah. Visually, two parallel vertical lines. The protagonist starts fixating on the geometry of the number. They think it looks like an equality sign.
Which is incredibly ironic.
Right, because the absolute defining feature of their romantic relationship is a complete lack of equality.
The partner is volatile, right, making threats of suicide.
Exactly, creating a dynamic of hostage and captor rather than equal partners.
I need to pause you there, though, because the notes describe the protagonist just spiraling into this intense numerological paranoia.
Oh, the Kabbalah stuff.
Yeah. They start frantically researching the Kabbalah string theory, trying to find the cosmic significance of the number 11. They're asking, is a number being done on us?
It sounds unhinged.
I mean, why string theory? That feels like a massive leap from a brass number on a front door.
Well, under extreme psychological distress, the human brain engages in hyperactive pattern recognition. It's this phenomenon called epiphania.
Hypophenia. Okay.
It's the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between entirely unrelated things. When the emotional structure of your life is collapsing, your brain desperately tries to build a new structure out of whatever raw materials are lying around.
Ah, so they're trying to find order in the chaos.
Exactly. For the protagonist, string theory and the Kabbalah offer these complex, rigid systems of universal order. If the chaos in the apartment is just a mathematical equation they haven't solved yet, then maybe it can be controlled.
That makes so much sense.
Eventually, the 11 shifts from an equality sign to a mirror of that Plath quote we talked about. Two separate parallel lines lying back to back, never intersecting.
Wow. Okay, so if the mind is frantically searching for meaning in abstract mathematics, what happens when it is forced to confront physical, biological reality?
Because Lewis quietly slips a devastating piece of medical history into the narrative right around here.
Yeah. The partner has a history of tuberculosis.
And we need to be very specific about the nature of this TB. It wasn't just like a standard pulmonary infection.
Right.
It was a rare, disseminated form that spread through the bloodstream and actively compromised the partner's eye.
This is where I have to completely reject the supernatural interpretation of the haunting, at least at this specific point.
Because of the medical reality.
Yes. When you factor in the tuberculosis, this isn't a ghost story anymore. It's a story of profound biological panic.
Oh, totally.
Just think about it for a second. Imagine the low-level ambient terror of realizing that the air trapped inside your sealed apartment is comprised of the exact exhalations of someone carrying a blood-borne infectious disease.
It's terrifying. The boundary between my body and your body is literally obliterated by the HVAC system.
Exactly. What passes between bodies when the microbiome itself becomes a weaponized space?
See, the concept of the haunted house historically relies on the threat coming from the architecture, like the walls bleed, the floorboards creak.
The classic tropes.
Right. But Lewis relocates the haunted house into the human respiratory system. The protagonist becomes hyper-aware of proximity. Every single breath the partner takes is a potential transmission of this sort of ancestral, dormant decay.
Which triggers an absolute collapse of perception. I mean, there's a scene the protagonist is sleeping downstairs. In the dead of night, they wake up to their lover beckoning them to come upstairs to bed.
The stairwell scene.
Yeah, and in the half-light of the stairwell, something terrifying occurs. The lover's face structurally transposes into the protagonist's father's face.
It just shifts.
It shifts. The protagonist physically recoils in horror, and after that night, they never share a bed again.
We can analyze that face rupture through the lens of trauma-induced prosopagnosia or face blindness.
Okay, break that down for us.
Basically, when the nervous system is completely flooded with cortisol and fear, the brain's fusiform gyrus, which is the area responsible for facial recognition, it can just misfire.
So it pulls up the wrong face.
Yeah. The brain reaches into its archives of trauma.
Yeah.
The father, who is associated in the notes with dark rooms and historical pain, is suddenly projected onto the partner. The brain is screaming that the current threat is identical to the foundational threat.
It's an infection of vision. Seeing itself becomes fundamentally unreliable.
Which ties back to the TB.
Right. We have the partner's eye, physically scarred by tuberculosis. We have the protagonist's vision, projecting a phantom father onto a living lover.
And Lewis deepens this instability with that seemingly random anecdote about the Halloween party.
Oh, the decorative eyeballs?
Yeah, there are fake eyeballs involved, and just the sheer sight of them induces this emergency tone of pure exhaustion in the protagonist.
An echo chain, right? Eyes, infected vision, fake eyeballs, misseeing. You cannot trust what you're looking at, and you cannot trust the compromised eyes looking back at you.
Exactly. And if the biological anatomy of the occupants is failing, lungs, eyes, neural pathways, it is only a matter of time before the physical anatomy of the building begins to violently mirror that breakdown.
The architecture develops an autoimmune response.
That is a great way to put it.
And it happens in the most visceral way imaginable. The protagonist wakes up one morning, walks toward the balcony entrance, and sees what look like grains of rice scattered across the floor.
But it's not rice.
No. Upon closer inspection, it is hundreds of squirming maggots.
And the text is very explicit about this. There is no source material.
None. No rotting meat, no forgotten garbage.
The decay is seemingly spontaneous.
The protagonist just starts bleaching the entire floor, absolutely horrified, trying to read the infestation as a sign.
It's the ultimate manifestation of the unspoken fear we were just discussing.
Right. It is disease and decay emerging from the floorboards, multiplying where it absolutely shouldn't. The apartment itself is breeding the rot that the protagonist fears is hiding in their partner's bloodstream.
And the failure of containment just rapidly escalates from the apartment level to the building's entire infrastructure.
The sewerage problem.
A massive sewerage problem erupts across the entire unit block. Literal chunks of human waste begin spilling out of the downpipes directly into the street.
Oh, God.
The building's digestive tract has effectively ruptured.
Boundaries are collapsing simultaneously on every front. I mean, the human immune system, the emotional boundary of the couple, the plumbing of the structure. Nothing can keep the toxic waste contained.
No, it's all spilling out.
And this systemic failure is perfectly counterscored by these aggressive notices from the building's strata management.
Oh, the strata notes.
Yeah, for those unfamiliar, strata is the Australian term for the body corporate or the homeowners association that manages communal building affairs. And these notices begin echoing through the notes like a desperate Greek chorus.
They're printed in all caps, too. Do not place objects in the basement.
They just keep appearing. Do not place objects in the basement.
Right. And on the surface, it's just standard bureaucratic housekeeping. But placed alongside the overflowing raw sewage and the spontaneous maggots, it reads as this frantic psychological mandate.
Like they're hiding something.
Well, the basement represents the subconscious of the building. The strata management is desperately trying to prevent the residents from feeding the subconscious, trying to stop the foulness from rising from the bottom up.
The atmospheric pressure becomes just unbearable. And following the death of their mother, the protagonist flees.
They go to Kolkata, right?
Yes, seeking geographical distance from a partner who has become dangerously unstable. And this trip represents a massive shift in the text.
We really need to bring in Vec Lewis's own background here.
Definitely.
Lewis is a senior lecturer in Latin American studies with Anglo-Indian heritage. Her academic and personal work is deeply invested in unpacking colonial history and what she calls the uneasy architectures of kinship.
So when the protagonist arrives in Kolkata, they feel the sudden, profound unstringing from colonial ghosts.
The geography dictates the haunting. Kolkata is a city layered with immense historical and colonial trauma. Yet for the protagonist, the specific domestic density that was suffocating them in Sydney is it's gone.
The bodily awareness shifts. The air is breathable again because the immediate biological and psychological threat has been removed.
But escaping a haunting isn't as simple as changing time zones, is it?
No, it's not. Because while the protagonist is breathing freely in India, the partner who is left totally alone in apartment 11 sends a text message.
And the partner claims they are now sensing and seeing ghosts in the apartment.
The exact wording is, "Only notice them, now you're not here."
Which is wild. We are looking at a localized folly, a do, or a shared psychotic disorder, but fractured by thousands of miles.
Right. Is the partner experiencing a genuine psychological break induced by insulation?
Or is their vision weakened by TB, hallucinating shadows?
Or did the protagonist leave behind such a dense residue of paranoia that the partner is now breathing it in?
And Lewis refuses to prioritize one reality over the others.
Which makes it so much scarier. Anyway, when the protagonist finally returns to Sydney, they are thrust right back into the mystery of the building. The strata's obsessive mandates about the basement eventually lead the protagonist down a historical rabbit hole.
They dig into the archival records of the property.
Yes, and they find out that long before it was partitioned into residential units, the building was a commercial warehouse.
Specifically, it manufactured dolls.
Dolls.
Yeah, and the original basement from that factory era was retained.
The motifs we've been tracking suddenly snap together with terrifying precision here.
Forms without interiority. Bodies constructed to mimic life, but entirely hollow. Doll eyes, quite literally, buried in the dark underneath the building.
It's the uncanny valley.
Precisely. The uncanny valley is that revulsion we feel when something looks almost but not quite human. The doll warehouse is the architectural equivalent of the uncanny valley.
Wow.
It perfectly mirrors the protagonist's relationship. A structure that looks like a partnership from the outside, but is entirely devoid of life on the inside.
It also completely recontextualizes the psychic's warning from the beginning. Not the visible room, something underneath.
It wasn't just a metaphor about emotional baggage.
No, it was a literal architectural fact. There were manufactured dead eyes buried beneath their feet the entire time.
And this archival discovery forces the protagonist to audit their own history. They start mentally fact-checking all the places they've lived, going all the way back to Perth.
They fixate on a previous residence at Elatine Place.
Because while living there, a mysterious, aggressive fungal or bacterial illness swept through the property, sickening everyone inside.
And the horrifying realization hits them like a physical blow. The sickness wasn't confined to Elatine Place. It followed them.
We are dealing with the mechanics of embodied memory here. Trauma and chronic stress, they don't just live in the mind, they alter our epigenetic expression.
They change our biology.
Yeah, they change our cortisol baselines. The protagonist realizes they aren't just a victim of a sick building, they are a carrier of an effective illness, basically transporting this highly contagious atmosphere of dread from one postal code to the next.
And right as this internal paradigm shifts, the external world delivers the climax.
The storm.
A freak storm hits Sydney. The drainage systems fail entirely, and apartment 11 slowly begins to flood.
The response to the flood really highlights the total disconnect between the two residents, too.
Oh, absolutely. The protagonist warns the partner, who is out of the apartment at the time. The partner just brushes it off casually, replying that the same thing happened while the protagonist was in India, but a plunger fixed it.
A plunger.
Yeah.
Using a plunger to treat a systemic structural flood is the perfect metaphor for their entire dynamic.
The partner is applying surface-level tools to a foundational collapse.
Meanwhile, the protagonist is trapped inside as the water rises above their ankles. The humidity spikes. They're sweating, completely overwhelmed, hyper-attuned to the moisture in the air.
They retreat to their bedroom, futilely bailing water with buckets for hours, just listening as the water violently drips through the floorboards into the apartments below them.
You know, water is the universal literary symbol for the dissolution of boundaries. The flood is the ultimate overflow. The external containment systems of the architecture are collapsing in exact, real-time parallel to their internal emotional containment.
Lewis makes a brilliant, tragic observation in the notes regarding this climax, too. The protagonist desperately wants to scapegoat the partner.
They compare the partner to Ged's shadow in Ursula K. Le Guin's Wizard of Earthsea.
Yes, a dark parasitic attachment that needs to be severed. They want to point the finger and say, you brought the TB, you brought the darkness, you are the infection. But the protagonist realizes that the partner is also a host.
And a host is a biological battleground. To be a host means you are harboring the parasite, yes,
Right.
but you are also actively being consumed by it.
Right.
The partner is a victim of their own blood, a victim of the apartment's dark matter, and a victim of their shared depression.
Which brings us to the aftermath. The relationship finally shatters completely. The apartment descends into absolute silence.
And eventually the partner leaves, moving to Mexico in a state of deep anxiety.
The volatile element has been removed. The supposedly infected partner is on another continent, and yet the notes deliver a final, chilling twist.
The protagonist is completely alone in apartment 11.
Yes.
And now the protagonist is the one who hears and senses the ghosts.
It upends the entire investigation. The partner saw ghosts when the protagonist was in India. The protagonist sees ghosts when the partner is in Mexico.
The source of the haunting just refuses to be pinned down.
Was the darkness radiating from the doll eyes in the basement? Was it multiplying in the partner's infected bloodstream?
Or was it suspended entirely in the invisible air between them, only becoming visible when one half of the equation was removed?
The ambiguity really is the point. The physical apartment 11 has dissolved entirely into an internal landscape.
The two parallel lines of the number 11 are no longer two different people in separate rooms. They are a fractured, parallel consciousness within a single person.
It drags us relentlessly back to the mother's psychic warning at the very beginning of the deep dive. Be careful what you take in what settles.
Those words now carry a devastating triple meaning.
Exactly. It is a warning about emotional despair settling into a relationship. It is a warning about architectural history, what is buried underneath the floorboards.
But most terrifyingly, it is a biological warning about what you physically inhale, what absorbs into your lung tissue, and what permanently alters your own internal systems.
It forces us to examine the mechanics of inheritance and transmission. What microscopic traumas do we absorb from the people we love, and what do we unconsciously leave behind in the drywall of the places we flee?
Vic Lewis has truly crafted a masterpiece of domestic terror.
She really has. And it leaves you with a deeply unsettling question to carry with you the next time you pack up your life into cardboard boxes. Science tells us that human chemosignals, the literal pheromones we exude when we are terrified, stressed, or aggressive, can embed themselves into porous materials.
They linger in carpets, in wood, in the paint on the walls.
So when you finally walk away from a deeply toxic relationship or a fractured home, do you actually leave the trauma behind? Or do those stress chemicals settle into your microbiome, packing themselves neatly into your own biology, just waiting to unpack their bags the second you unlock the door of your brand new, perfectly empty apartment?